B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn sukkah Daf Chof Daled. We're going to start 12 lines from the bottom of the Omid. And we're in the middle of a sugya. We saw in Daf Chof Gimel Omid Aleph in a Braisa that Rabbi Meir said, and we're discussing, we started with, are you allowed to use an animal as the wall of a sukkah? Rabbi Meir said not, Rabbi Yehuda said yes. And then, Shahoya Rabbi Meir, Oimer, Rabbi Meir said that the following things you cannot use an animal for. A wall for a sukkah, a lechi for a mavoi, pasim for birois, those right-angled or those posts in the corners of the wells, and the halachas of a goylol, a cover of a tomb, of a grave, that those stringent halachas of a goylol, which are discussed in other places in Shas. We're not going to go into it here exactly what these stringencies are, but there are halachas of a goylol. And an animal cannot be used for any of these things, and these halachas cannot apply to animals. And then we had Rabbi Yossi Aglili said also you cannot write a get on an animal. So we discussed, according to Rabbi Meir, who said this halacha, that you cannot use an animal. Why? So we saw Abaya said we're afraid the animal will die and it will no longer serve its purpose. Reb Zera says we're afraid the animal will run away and again it will not be able to serve its purpose. Says the Gemara here, Bein leman omar shema Thomas, Bein leman omar shema Tivrach, whether it's Abaya's explanation in Reb Meir or Reb Zera's explanation in Reb Meir as to why you cannot use an animal for any of these things, midoiraisa mechitza ma'alyahi. All the while the animal is here and alive, then it's minatayra, it's a regular wall. There's no reason it shouldn't be used as a mechitza. Just for Rabbanon udegozruba. It's just that midrabbanon, the Rabbanon said it might die, it might run away, so you cannot rely on it. Elo me'ata le Reb Meir titame mishum goylol. Then we have one issue, the one halacha that was mentioned before, and that is the stringencies of the goylol. All the other halachas, you cannot use it for a wall of a sukkah. Minat Torah, it says a good wall. We're machmir and say, don't use it as a wall. Lechi, the same thing. Minat Torah, it's a good lechi. Midrabanon, don't use it as a lechi. When it comes to goylol, Minat Torah, this has the status of a goylol with all the tumas and all the chumras, all the stringencies. Midrabanon, they're going to say what? They're going to say, so it doesn't have all those chumras? How can they do that? Alamotnan, why did we learn in a Mishnah? And the Rashi already asks it straight away, why are you asking from a Mishnah? Ask from the very brisa that we're coming from. But Rabbi Yehuda metame, mishum goylol, Rabbi Meir metayir. Rabbi Yehuda says, as we saw all along, Rabbi Yehuda is not afraid of all these things. Rabbi Yehuda says you can use an animal for all these things, that he wasn't in the discussion here. As Rabbi Meir says metayir. He says explicitly that the stringencies of the goylol, of the cover of the tomb, does not apply to these animals. They stay tahir. How can they stay tahir if it's only midrabanon that we don't let you use these animals? Ela Omer of Acha bar Yaakov. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov gives a third explanation to Rabbi Meir why Rabbi Meir says that an animal cannot be used and that these halachas don't apply to animals. That's a wall for a sukkah, a lechi for a mavoi, pasin lebirois, and goylol lekever. Why? It's not midrabanon. It's not just that the chachomim were afraid it might die, the chachomim were afraid it might run away. No. He says that minat Torah it's not a mechitza. Why? Kol mechitza she'imedes beruach eino mechitza. Any wall which is supported by ruach, air, something which is abstract. Rashi says it's a davar she'ein by mamish. A wall which is supported by something abstract, including anything live, which the spirit of something live is also ruach, it's also abstract. But we'll soon see later, it's not only the spirit of beings, of live animals, etc., but it's also other things. For example, an inflated flask. Also, if it has its size for a wall only because of air inside it, that's based and supported by something abstract, that's not called a mechitza. Ikad Omra, and others suggest a similar formula. Omer Bacha bar Yaakov, Kasavar Reb Meir, Kol mechitza she'eino asuya bidei adam. Any type of mechitza which cannot have been made by man, for example, something live, and it's not in the hands of a person to give life to any being. A person cannot make an animal alive. It's not in his hands, and therefore, eino mechitza minat Torah. It's not considered a significant mechitza. Any type of mechitza that it's not in man's hands to have put it there is not a good mechitza. My beinayu. In what case is there a difference between the two versions that we just saw now of Rabbi Acha Yaakov? Is it anything which is oimed beruach, which is supported, which exists on ruach, on spirit, on air, on something abstract, is not a mechitza, or the second version, that anything that cannot be done by man? The difference will be, for example, if you have a wall of a sukkah, if you have something which is supported on an inflated flask, and when you deflate it, it's no longer there, it doesn't exist. So the opinion that says that the first version of Rabbi Acha Yaakov, that says the problem is that this is a mechitza, it is a partition that's supported on air, and that's insignificant. Over here also, this blown up, this inflated flask, it's air, and therefore it's insignificant. The opinion that says that a wall that cannot be made by man, it's because it's got a spirit that's given by Hashem, and Hashem only, is not a mechitza. Over here, it was inflated by man, and therefore it will be a good and relevant mechitza. Continues the Gemara, Omar Mar, Mishum Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein Omru, it was said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein, Af ein koisvin olav gitei noshim, you're not allowed to write a get on a live animal. My Talmud Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein asks the Gemara, what would be the reason and source for this? The Tanya we learned in a brisa. It says in the pasuk, Kikach ish isha uvalo v'hoyo im loisim tachin be'enov kimotza bo'er v'azdover v'kosav lo sefer krisus, that a husband who wants to divorce his wife has to write for her a sefer krisus, which is a scroll, or it's a sefer, sort of a sefer krisus, which severs the relationship between the couple. V'nosan biyodo, he gives it into her hand, v'shilcha mi beisoi, and he sends her from his house. So it says sefer. Since this get is called a sefer, ein li elo sefer, so it would seem you can only write it in a sefer. Minayin, and sefer means on parchment. Minayin, the rabbis kol davar, how do you know that you can write a get on anything else? On a wooden board, or on a leaf, an olive leaf, wherever it may be. How do you know that you are allowed to write a get on anything else? The rabbis kol davar, Talmud loimer, since it says in a different pasuk, it says usnei ha'isha achrein v'kosav lo sefer krisus v'nosan biyodo, etc. It says v'kosav lo. If it says v'kosav lo, mikol mokim, you can write it on anything. Imkein ma Talmud loimar sefer. If it says v'kosav lo, which means you can write it on anything, why does it say you have to write it sefer? Where sefer would have seemed to mean only on parchment. It's coming to teach us something. In the same way as sefer is a davar she'ein b'ruach chaim, is something which doesn't have any spirit in it, it's not alive, ve'ein oichel, and it's not a food product. Af kol davar, this day it says v'kosav, that you can write it on anything, it's only on something which is she'ein b'ruach chaim, something which is not alive, ve'ein oichel, and is not a food item. So this is the source for Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein, that you cannot write a get on a live animal. V'rabbanon, the Chachomim who say that you can write a get on a live animal, what do they say? How do they understand? It says sefer, is sefer not teaching us you have to write it on something which is not alive? Rabbanon, ikosav b'sefer, if it would have said v'kosav lo b'sefer, in a sefer, kedukamras, I would understand that that's what it means. You write it on a sefer, on something which is not alive. Hashtag sefer, now that it just says v'kosav lo sefer krisos, it's not telling us about where you're writing it, it's telling us about what the message is. That you write v'kosav lo sefer krisos l'sfiras dvarim ba'alma. You just put onto paper, or put onto anything for that matter, even something live, sefer krisos, the narrative of the severing of the relationship. L'sfiras advarim, the sefer means the term of sipur, of talking, of narrating. So you're just saying over, you're writing what this, the sequence of events of the separation between this couple is being put down. Dvarim ba'alma uda'asa. V'rabbanon. And the Rabbanon, hai v'kosav mai dorshibei. we said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein, since Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein understood that sefer would have meant only on parchment, they need v'kosav lo to say you can write it anywhere. According to the Rabbanon, the sefer doesn't mean parchment; it just means sipur, just saying over. Then what are you going to learn from the words v'kosav lo? Why do I need v'kosav lo? I never thought that you have to write it on anything, especially on parchment. I always knew you could write it on anything. Says the Gemara, Humi boile, we need this to teach us that b'ksiva misgarsha. V'kosav lo means the only way of severing a relationship between a husband and a wife is with writing, with miskareshes. V'eino miskareshes b'kesef. But you cannot give her something of monetary value and say, take this, and with this you are divorced. I may have thought, since the pasuk puts leave a woman leaving the home to a woman being taken into a home to kiddushin, it says in the pasuk v'yotza mi beisoi v'holcha v'hoisa leish acher, she leaves his house and goes to become a wife to somebody else. So I may have thought that we compare the divorce to the marriage. And marriage, we know that you can give money. Hariat mekudeshes li b'tabazu. You can give somebody money. A man can give a woman money, and with that she becomes married. So I may have thought in the same way as you get married, you can become married with money. You can also become divorced with money. That's why it says v'kosav lo. You can only get divorced with a get, not with money. Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein, who needs v'kosav lo to tell us that sefer doesn't mean parchment only, it means anything. You can write on anything. So he hasn't got v'kosav lo to tell us that you can only get divorced with writing a get and not with money. So how is he going to know that you cannot get divorced with money? Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein, how does he know this from? From the fact that it says misefer krisus, not from the words v'kosav lo, but from the fact that it says sefer krisus nafkulo. It says a sefer, which is this scroll, is severing the relationship. Sefer kairusa, vein dover acher kairusa. Only a sefer, only this scroll, only this get can sever the relationship. Nothing else can. Ve'idach, and the chachomim, who they learn out this halacha that you can only a get can cut off the kesher, not money. They learn that from the kosav lo. What are they going to do with the sefer krisus? Ve'idach, ahumi boile, I need sefer krisus to say ledova kairos beinoi lebeino, to tell us that it has to be a sefer which is kairos, which is absolutely severs the relationship. If there's any part of the relationship, if there's any dependency on the husband that still stays after the divorce is invalid. Kedetanya, like we learned in a brisa, if somebody says to his wife, here's a get, almanos shelo tishti yain, on condition that you don't drink wine, on condition you don't go back to your father's house forever, it's not called a get, because her whole life she won't be drinking wine, and her whole life she won't be going to her father's house because of her ex-husband. Well, that means she's always dependent still on her ex-husband. In that case, the get is not valid. However, if he says kol shloshim yom, if he says that this get is valid on condition that you don't drink wine and you don't go to your father's house just for 30 days, then hareza krisos, it's a good get right away. Because she's not going to remain dependent on him for the rest of the life. She's just dependent on that condition for just 30 days. Ve'idach. And Rabbi Yitzchok Lobenstein, who he learned from Sefer Krisos, that Sefer Korusa ve'ein davar acher korusa, how's he going to know this halacha that if there's a dependency on the former husband, an eternal, a permanent dependency, that the get is not valid? Ve'idach, mikoris krisos nafka. It could have said misefer koris. Why did it say misefer krisos? To tell us two things. Number one, to tell us that only the get severs the relationship and nothing else does. And also to tell us there has to be an absolute severing and there's not allowed to be any dependency left over. Ve'idach and the Rabbanon, koros krisos lo doroshi, they didn't feel it was important that you have to learn something from the fact that it says krisos and doesn't just say the word koros. Continue, says the next Mishnah. If somebody makes a sukkah in between the trees, he's not leaning. The sukkah is not leaning on the trees that we saw already before. Sukkah on an ilon is an issue. The sukkah is on the ground, just the walls are the trees. Va'ilonis, defanis lo, and the trees serving as walls for the sukkah, ksheira, it's kosher. Omer vacha bayakiv. Kol mechitza she'eino yechaylo lamid baruach matzuya. Any wall that cannot stand, that gets moved around with a regular wind that's blowing, is not called a mechitza. Eino mechitza. Tanan. We saw in our Mishnah, ha'isei is tzukase beino ilonis, va'ilonis defanis lo, ksheira. We're going to have an issue. In our Mishnah it says you can use a tree for the walls of the sukkah. But we also, Rabbi Yaakov said that if it moves, it cannot be a mechitza. Hoka ozil va'osi. These trees, they just move in the wind. If they move, they cannot be kosher walls for the sukkah. Answers the Gemara, we're talking about old, fat trees. They're not going to move in the wind. Asks the Gemara, if you have a row of trees, it's true that the main part of the tree might not move, but there's also all the branches in between that are also serving as being the wall of the sukkah, and these branches, these leaves, they're going to move. The answer is the Gemara, it's talking about that you actually tied, or you used branches to tie together and make sure that the branches and leaves of the tree won't move. If so, asks the Gemara, so what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? Nothing's moving, so fine, why shouldn't you be able to use it for the wall of a sukkah? I may have thought, we should make a gzeira. You might come to put some things down on the tree, which you're using as the walls for your sukkah, and you're not allowed to use the tree on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Komash Malon, we're not concerned about that. We're not concerned you're going to use it, and therefore you can just use it as the walls for the sukkah, and that's okay. Continues the Gemara. Tashema, Hayasham Ilon, Oygeder. Here we're talking about those pasei birois. You had the Rishus Harabim, and the people and the animals were thirsty whilst they were coming to be Oile Regel, and they wanted to be able to go into and drink from the well, from the water. So, and the only way to do that would be if the area around the well, or around the pit of water, is not going to be considered a Rishus Harabim. How can you corner off this area? So they couldn't make walls. So what they did was they would take 4 posts and put them one on each corner. They would actually take anything which could have theoretically been cornered off into a right angle post of an amma on each side of this right angle. They would put these 4 posts, one on each corner, and then, so to speak, every side, every direction had 2 walls, one on each side of an amma, and that would suffice. And this is we've learnt about this in Masechet Shabbos. So Hayasham Ilon, what happens if one of these corners was actually a tree, or a geder, or a fence, which is typically a wall of stones, or mechitzas konim, or there was a ready-made a wall of reeds there, nidoin mishum diyumad. So we see there that if you have a tree that is wide enough to be a diyumad, a double post, it's that wide that you can theoretically and virtually speaking, you could have cornered it off to be an amma on each side, then that tree can serve as one of the diyumdim. But did Rabbi Yaakov not say that if it moves, then it's not considered a mechitza? Over here, this tree is going to move, and if the tree itself doesn't move, but the branches and the leaves around the tree, which are making up part of this diyumad, are moving. Answers the Gemara, Hasam Nami, there also Mishum Da'ovid Le Behutza V'Dafna. It must be that you're using branches to tie down anything that could move. It should be firm and fixed. Continues the Gemara, Tashema, Ilon, a tree HaMesach that covers over Al Ha'oretz. You have the tall branches of a tree that are draped right down to the ground, and there's a whole area underneath them. Let's say you're in Rishus Harabim. You're not allowed to carry in Rishus Harabim. Or even in a Carmelis, you're not allowed to carry more than 4 amis. And this tree, if it's draped right down, then providing that there isn't 3 tfochim between the edge of the branches and the floor and the ground, metaltlin tachtov, you're allowed to, we say lovud, and we say this is called a mechitza. These branches are considered a mechitza, and then it's as if the area is enclosed, and you can carry inside it, not just 4 amos that you can carry anywhere, but you can carry under the whole area of the tree. Amai hoka'ozil va'osi. These branches are moving, these leaves are moving, and if they're moving, then they're not a mechitza. How can you say that, providing that they come down low enough, that it has the status of a mechitza, and the area underneath, just beyond this tree, underneath these branches that are draped over, is an enclosed area with a mechitza? Why is it a mechitza? It's moving. Says the Gemara, there also you used branches to make sure that they would be fixed and permanent, or fixed and they will not move. If so, that means that if man went out of his way to actually make this wall and to make this wall fixed, then it's not just it happens to be an enclosed area which you happen to be allowed to carry in more than 4 amos, but then there's a restriction that the area mustn't be more than 5,000 square amos, which is the Beis Sosayim, which is we learnt about in Eruvin. But if man went and made a fencing of branches round to make sure that they wouldn't move, then Aloma Omar Rav Huna Bredi v'Yeshua, why did Rav Huna Bredi v'Yeshua say Ein metaltlin by elo beis sosayim, that you're only allowed to carry under this tree providing it's not more than 5,000 square amos? So, and if this person made a wall, then this was a wall that was made with the intentions, it was made by man to be a mechitza, and an enclosure made by a person can be even more than 5,000 square amos. You made it in order to live there, in order to reside there. It's the residence. And anything that's been enclosed for residence is not restricted to the 5,000 square amos. Answers the Gemara, Mishum dehava dira shetashmisha la'avir, because he didn't enclose it in order to have a place of residence under that tree. If he would have done that, of course he would not be restricted. But the only reason that he's made this enclosure is that the person who's watching the fields, the guard who's watching the fields and needs this shade, is be able to protect the area outside the tree. Is tashmisha la'avir. The main purpose is to serve the area outside the tree, to make sure that it would stay safe. Since it was not enclosed to serve as residence inside the area, and it was just there to serve a different purpose, therefore it's still restricted to the 5,000 square amos. Continues the Gemara. Toshima, we learned Shavas betel. If you had a mound, and this mound shu gavoya asora, it was 10 tfachim high, v'hu, and it's me'arba amos at beis sosayim. It's anywhere between 4 by 4 amos and 5,000 square amos. Since it's got the height of 10 tfachim, we say good asik. Virtually speaking, it's as if the walls raise up, are extended up, and it's considered as an enclosed area up to beis sosayim. Similarly, v'chein beneka, if you have a crack, if you have in a rocky area, you suddenly have a type of a ditch of 10 shu omek asara, which is 10 tfachim deep, v'hu me'arba amos, and it's anywhere between 4 by 4 amos ad beis sosayim until 5,000 square amos. Or v'chein komo ktsura, if you have a field of grains, of stalks, and there's an area inside it which has been harvested, cut down, and the upright stalks, which are 10 tfachim high, are surrounding this area, then mahalichas kula, then you're allowed to carry not just 4 amos, which you can carry anywhere, even in Rosh Hashanah up to 4 amos you can carry, but here, Caramelis, you can carry in the entire area up to 5,000 square amos. And since this is where your place of residence is, when Shabbos came in, you can carry beyond this area, not carry, you can walk. You can walk out beyond this area 2,000 amos. Even though it's not fixed. We're talking about one of the examples were that you have the stalks, the upright stalks, 10 tfachim high, which are serving as a mechitza, as an enclosure. How can you say it's a mechitza? They move in the wind. Says the Gemara Hasamnami there too, it must be that you use some branches to strengthen them and to fix them in place that they would not move in the wind, and therefore it had the status of a mechitza, and then you can carry in the whole area inside it, and you have tchum, you have 2,000 amis from that, from any edge of this area with which to walk. You can't carry outside it, but you can walk 2,000 amis. In the next shiur, we're going to continue the next Mishnah.